First of all, it's clear now Justin Trudeau is seen as an absolute joke on the world stage.
So yesterday, Poilievre came into the studio at 6:40 a.m. radio and gave an interview. Actually walked into the studio and gave them an interview. Never, ever heard Trudeau do anything like that. So I'm going to skip the first part. What he did in the first part, he talked about how he's really, upset about what happened to Trump and everything, the news about the shooting and stuff, and wishes Trump well and the families and everybody them well. But there's a few questions that the interviewer asked, and one of them is, did you think that this could happen in Canada?
I do. I just don't know what the alternative is. Look, we have great security teams that help. Our opposition leaders are now given security, which I think is unfortunately a necessary part of today's political world. But the alternative is for us to be like they are in dictatorships. It's funny. I was door knocking in Riverside South, is a suburb of Ottawa, and I'm talking to this lady who's an immigrant from Cuba, and in the middle of the conversation, she burst into tears. I said, "What are you crying about?" She said, "I'm so happy." I said, "What are you happy about?" She said, "I come from a place where people like you never come to see people like me, and I can't believe that you're at my doorstep." And she said, where she comes from, politicians roll by in limousines with 4-foot thick, bullet-resistant windows, and they never talk to people. We don't want to be a place like that. So unfortunately it means we have to take some risks to be close to the people that we work for.
First of all, he said, work for the people. So that's something that, that's what politicians are supposed to say. And another question that was asked is that Poilievre is calling Trudeau wacko. Wacko. Is that causing, could that cause an issue?
First of all, let's be very clear. My criticisms of the Prime Minister have been entirely reasonable and focused on his policy agenda. We are not going to censor ourselves now. We're not going to allow this shooter to shut down our debate. My criticisms of Justin Trudeau doubling housing costs, putting in a 61% carbon tax, driving 2 million people to a food bank, unleashing crime and chaos in our communities, that criticism will continue. It is my job. And I will not, this debate is not, this kind of incident is not going to shut down our democracy and force us into a self-censorship. The worst thing that could happen is that we become a country, the dictatorial countries where no one's allowed to criticize the leadership. And we're not going to do that. I will continue to do my job, which is to hold the government accountable, including the Prime Minister, for the damage that he's doing in people's lives. That is my job, and that will not stop.
Well, that's great to hear, because that's how politics works in a civilized Western country. Another thing that they asked was, Poilievre put out a tweet about the shooting, and he said that he was glad that the shooter was unalived. To me, I believe that was because the guy started randomly shooting audience members, and I'm pretty sure that was towards that. But let's just hear what Pierre Poilievre has to say on his tweet that he left on X.
Killed another human being. He I don't care what you think about President Trump, former President Trump. The reality is he's a human being, and so was the other innocent victim who died here, heroically protecting his loved ones. So I don't know what people would expect me to say.
I'm actually not sure what anybody would have said about whatever you said, because they would have said something about it anyway.
That's life, and frankly, I don't care.
So in the next part of the interview, he starts talking about shutting down safe supply places that people can go to safely do jibby-jabby stuff. I have to censor some of this because YouTube doesn't like grown-up content. So let's listen to what he's got to say. Anything I censor, the script, we'll spell it really badly and put it here somewhere. Let's have a listen.
Not for places, not for drug dens that are next to schools. Like the one I was visiting in Montreal is literally meters away from a school. Mm-hmm. The children, I've seen people doing lewd sex acts right next to their playground. They're watching people shoot up, smoke, do other hard drugs, violent acts, like literally within meters of a playground. No, I would shut that down tomorrow. We have the power under Section 56(1) of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. The other one is this wonderful mother here in Toronto was hit by a stray bullet flying out of a so-called safe injection site. It's not safe to be hit by a flying stray bullet. I would just shut them down. As for transition, my plan is to invest in treatment and recovery. All the money that Trudeau and the NDP are giving to subsidize these drug dens, I would take all that money away and I would immediately infuse it into treatment facilities that detox.
How long would that take?
Well, it will take some time, but you've got to start somewhere.
He was then asked, what about the people stuck in the middle? What about the people who are hooked on this and need to go to these places to get their supply? What's going to happen to them? You know, what's the look going to be like once Pierre Poilievre takes over and changes things?
Well, it looks a lot better than it does now. I mean, there's no such thing as safe supply, by the way. This is the kind of Orwellian language that the radical, wacko, NDP liberal activists sneak into our lexicon. It's not safe. They're giving out. And we now know definitively from the police forces it's being diverted to kids who prior to that were not using any drugs. So it's not safe. It's unsafe supply. It's not harm reduction. It's harm production. The results are in. We've seen a 400% increase in overdose deaths in BC, where this policy has been most enthusiastically embraced, and a 162% increase nationwide. So now that we have the evidence that this is unsafe, we should shut it down. By the way, nobody else does this, eh? Like, they make it sound like this is normal. This is not normal.
It's not what Portugal does.
Portugal doesn't do this. Europe doesn't do it. The American cities that experimented with it because they had radical leftist governments in their cities, they've all abandoned it. This is weird policy. It is extreme, it is radical, and it has been a nightmare for our country. We need to get back to common sense, and that is to ban hard drugs, stop subsidizing it, put the money in treatment and recovery, bring our loved ones home drug-free.
So then he was asked about calling Justin Trudeau a joke on the NATO stage.
First of all, it's clear now Justin Trudeau is seen as an absolute joke on the world stage. I was embarrassed to see our Prime Minister treated like a human piñata by the rest of the NATO countries. They look upon him with total and complete ridicule. Canadians are tired of being embarrassed by a Prime Minister who prances around and preens and lectures the world without doing his part.
And about how he called out Trudeau and about getting to the 2% for the defence spending, and whether or not he would make the 2% defence spending, even though he doesn't really have access to the books or where the money's going to come from. Anyway, here's what he said.
There are no details. What he did is he got completely humiliated again, just like he did when he danced around in India, or when he got drunk and sang songs in the middle of the night at the Queen's funeral. And he was derided and ridiculed by the other leaders. And then after the whole thing was done, he held a press conference where no one showed up, an empty theater, to claim that if he's reelected 2 more times, that he's going to hit the 2% target. So that's what he's done. To get to 2% is an extra $14 or $15 billion a year. That's this year. It's actually even more than that later on, every year that goes by. I need to find the money before I promise it. So you're not going to get from me as making promises to spend money that I don't know how I can pay for.
There will be a big price to pay if we don't step up, we don't get close to that 2%. What did he say about that?
There will be a big price to pay. My answer is that we need to deliver capabilities to protect North America. That's what the Americans want. They want to know that their northern flank is safe. I will rebuild our military to ensure that America does not have to worry about its northern flank. That's really what they care about. At the end of the day, they want to know that Russia, China, and other hostile forces are not using Canada as a backdoor to threaten the United States of America. So, what will I do? I will cut foreign aid. I will cut back on botched procurement. I'll cut back on back office bureaucracy and put all of that into frontline support for our soldiers, sailors, and airmen. We will also reinforce our commitment to NORAD, and we will ensure that we have a strong presence in the Arctic to keep the bad guys out. That is what the Americans really want more than anything. If I were to announce through total incompetence, waste $20 billion a year without adding any new capability to our military, I could hit 2%, but it wouldn't make North America more safe. By contrast, if we take the money we're already spending and we spend it right, like we did during the war in Afghanistan, then we could give the Americans the assurance that their northern flank is safe, and that's what they ultimately want. We didn't hit 2% when we were delivering the biggest pound-for-pound contribution to fighting the Taliban in southern Afghanistan, and yet the Americans were very satisfied. Why? Not because of the math, but because of the contribution. So what mattered, and why were we able to do more with less? Because we were buying off the shelf. We're buying strategic airlift and helicopters and other equipment that we needed to beat the enemy at the best price for taxpayers. So we need to get back to spending our money wisely, expanding our capabilities without necessarily expanding all of the costs. That is what the Americans really want, and that's what I'm going to deliver.